I would like to introduce to you Andy Evans from Oceanex Energy. Andy is the CEO and co-founder of Oceanex Energy and also the former CEO and co-founder of the Star of the South. With over 20 years' experience in Australia's energy sector, he has been heavily involved in the development of renewable energy projects since 2006, firstly in onshore wind and bioenergy before introducing offshore wind into Australia in 2012. Please welcome to the stage, Andy Evans.
Thanks, Nicola, and good morning to everybody from wherever you are. I'll just get my presentation up. I'll run through things as evenly as I can. Of course, these slides will be prepared and sent out to everybody, so obviously requests through Nicola and Kieran, but I've got about 15 to 20 slides I'm going to run through. I'm actually going to talk to some of the pictures as well as we go into what the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm is about, what it means, particularly for the Hunter region, but even more broadly for Australia. We've been very lucky. Offshore wind's been in the news a lot the last week or so, particularly in Victoria where I'm based. But what I'm really going to be focusing on is what I think are the most exciting projects in offshore wind, which are New South Wales based, and particularly the Novocastrian project, which we hope will be the subject of an announcement by the Commonwealth Minister later this year to open up an area so we can start applying for a feasibility licence. One thing I wanted to touch on just while we're on this opening slide is what I'll refer to a lot being floating foundations. So the turbines you see there are from a project called the Kincardine project off the coast of Scotland. So what's involved there? Well, there'll be up to 15 megawatt turbines, which are much stronger than land-based turbines, which have a nameplate capacity onshore of around 6 megawatts a unit. These turbines are 15 megawatts. You're looking at up to the hub height or the centerpiece of the blades there, the top of the tower, up to around about 140 metres above sea level. You've got blades at the moment are getting very large. They'll be over 110 or 115 metres each as well. And the yellow piece is really the interesting piece and the opportunity for particularly the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm. They're floating foundations, so a lot of steel, about 3,000 to 4,000 tonnes of steel, and they are anchored with mooring lines onto seabed, and it's deployed in waters of deeper than 70 metres. The depths that we're looking at on the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm are up to around 500 metres of water depth. So really new technology. There's only 3 wind farms out there globally, all mainly off the coast of Scotland and one off the coast of Norway as well. So aside from the size of things, I think there's a great technology opportunity for Australia and particularly the Hunter to be a leader in what we're doing. I will run through more broadly what we're doing in Australia, just to give some context as to what it means more for the Hunter and the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm. Just by way of very quick background, look, I've met a number of people on this session. Just to give some background, I'm one of the co-founders of the Star of the South Offshore Wind Farm, which is off the coast of Gippsland. That's still going through a development phase. We're only lucky enough to have the Commonwealth introduce legislation which came into effect only 4 months ago. So it's been a 10-year journey for Peter and I, and look, I've even aged since that last photo there, which is only a couple of years ago. But the exciting thing for us is not only is it about Australians developing these projects, but we've also just announced about 8 weeks ago that Equinor, Norway's largest company and the leader in floating foundation offshore wind farms, are coming into our New South Wales projects. So that's a real leg up for accelerating what we're seeking to do, particularly in New South Wales. With Oceanex, we are looking at projects off the coast of Western Australia and New Zealand as well. But New South Wales, we think, is by far the best market in terms of connectability to the transmission grid, particularly in the Hunter, but also given the work in the industry, or the workforce in the industry, particularly in the Hunter and the Illawarra. We think the Hunter's a standout globally, given background, obviously, in power generation, a lot of the mining skills, marine-based logistics, and the like, a lot of the project management and engineering. So very excited about the Hunter. We've been looking at what we're doing. We've been very targeted in the areas that we're looking at. So you'll see a number of other projects getting announced out there. We think most of the best opportunities are mainly based around where there is grid availability coming up, usually due to the closure of big coal-fired power generators. So Newcastle and Wollongong are key ones. In terms of other New South Wales ones, we're really looking at Eden. Grid there is a bit further away around Tumut and Snowy Hydro, but we see there's an opportunity for what we call subsea HVDC cable under the sea back into Dapto around Wollongong to the connection point there. Bunbury has been a bit of a quiet sleeper for us the last few years, but that's certainly accelerating now with the closure of the Collie power station due 2027. So that just creates a lot of that grid availability to be able to plug in. One of the great challenges, particularly for New South Wales, is it's not renowned as an onshore renewables hub. You've got a lot of black coal coming off in the next 13 years, around 70% of the state's power generation. So getting access to grid is critical, and that's why we believe offshore wind is going to be a key to the success of electrifying New South Wales over the next decade and beyond. We're really fortunate with offshore wind. We've got the resource very close to the coastline, and all the coal generators very close to the coastline as well. So you've got the wind resource, the route to market, and the transmission grid all really proximate to each other. So that augurs well for offshore wind. We're also looking at New Zealand, mainly around the North Island. Most of the opportunities are around that southwest part of the North Island, which is Taranaki. So they've got a transitioning offshore oil and gas region as well. So keen to get new energy in. It's a much smaller market. Thankfully, unlike Australia up until recently, they haven't had issues around green energy versus black energy. They just see it as energy and prosperity opportunities. So New Zealand's also a market we'd like to look at servicing as much as we can from New South Wales, but of course the steaming distance means that it's only going to be more the heavy infrastructure that we're looking at. In terms of what we're looking at across Australia, just to give context to show that the Novocastrian is not a one-off and will be able to leverage off other opportunities, here's an outline of our 5 main projects in Australia. Some of the key characteristics you'll see will be around the size of what we call the acreage or the area. So this is what's going through. If you've been following offshore wind recently, Commonwealth Government are getting ready to declare areas. The first one they've been working through is Gippsland at the moment. So they go through a 60-day public consultation process. And then the government takes up to 60 days to make a determination to declare an area. And declaring an area just means that a developer like Oceanex can actually make an application to get a feasibility license. At the moment, the feasibility licenses are declared or stated to be up to 700 square kilometres, but that may change. We're just waiting for the regulations to be finalised. The actual acreage, once you've actually got a constructed offshore wind farm, will be smaller, but we believe, looking at the feasibility side of things, to get a project the size of 2,000 megawatts, which in its own right, if you look at the Novocastrian, would probably power up to 10% of New South Wales electricity requirements, you will still need quite a sizable size of acreage. One thing we're really clear on in looking at projects off the New South Wales coast is to put them a minimum of 20 kilometres from the coastline. Now, at 20 kilometres, there still will be some visibility. It's really not till you get to about 30 kilometres from the coastline that on the clearest day, you may just see the tips of them. And that'll be a key issue. Certainly in Victoria, the areas that we're looking at, or in Gippsland that people are looking at, are much less residentialised. So they will be closer, but New South Wales, we think the best sites are actually further out. And with floating, we can go further out. You can go into deeper waters. So the cut-off point between what are called fixed foundations and floating foundations is really 70 metres of water depth. So under 70 metres of water depth, you have fixed foundations. Beyond 70 metres, you have floating foundations. So that's what we're doing for most of our projects, as you can see there, just from the chart, with Bunbury being the only fixed one that we're looking at in Australia. The dates I've got there are very ambitious. We've been working at offshore wind, certainly in Victoria, for 10 years. With Oceanex, New South Wales, it's 3 years. We're going to have to really sprint to be anywhere near commencing construction in 2028. I think part of the reason why we're going to be sprinting is just been delays in the regulatory framework being put in place. We're waiting for Minister Bowen at the moment, of course, to declare areas as well, particularly for the Hunter and our Novocastrian project. But all going well, I think realistically those dates will probably push a year or two, but we'll be looking at first generation is usually about 3 years into that 4-year of construction process. As I said, New Zealand, we're also looking at projects, but look, smaller projects given the size of the market and the opportunity over there. Now, looking at the opportunities for Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm, I think this is where you start to see some exciting numbers. These numbers have all been verified off the back of the work we've been doing for the last 10 years, particularly on the Star of the South project. So when you go through the CapEx amount, at the moment it's estimated to be around about 8 billion Australian dollars. Given the size of investors we have now, there is usually about a $200 million development expenditure requirement to get to the final investment decision. Given the size of investors, most of this is balance sheet funded. So you're not sort of incurring or requiring any sort of debt financing. Once you get into the CapEx, there'll be a whole variety of different investors. Given there are, we're early stage of offshore wind, there'll still be a high equity requirement in the gearing ratio, as opposed to other projects that have been out there and been built in other asset classes. But, we think there are huge opportunities for the region. Certainly at that early stage, we're looking at 3,000 plus jobs over a 3 to 4 year period. As much as possible, we've always got a locals first policy. So we're really lucky in the Hunter with all the established industries and workforce, but very much the mindset that already exists in regions such as the Hunter. Different down here in Victoria, where I'm based with Gippsland. Most of the industry has been based around brown coal extraction and power generation. You don't have as much of that marine-based and port hub sort of activity that goes on. So, other industries that are developing in the Hunter, such as hydrogen as well, are really good opportunities given the commonality of supply chain and workforce as well. So there'll be a lot of leveraging off other industries. In terms of local content, look, it can vary between 35 to 65% of local content. We think it's probably going to be at the lower end to start, particularly with floating foundations. A lot of that smarts and the early stage jobs will have to come from overseas, but we still think 35% of 8 billion is a large number. And once we sort of go through the projects and hopefully set the Hunter up as a base for other projects, that'll only increase going out to when we build the Illawarra and the Eden project as well. But I think the really exciting thing for the local region is that final figure as well. Given the size of the infrastructure and the need to be close to the wind turbines, those jobs, 300 local jobs, will be local. There's no need to go further beyond. There won't be fly in, fly out. Right. Look, I'll just run through what an offshore wind farm looks like. This is an image which has been shared fairly broadly. Particularly Newcastle Herald have been good in getting it out. So this just shows an outline of what offshore wind farms look like. The main difference is obviously, of course, you've got turbines out at sea, and a lot of our technology will be floating. So once you go through, I'll go on to the next slide. That gives an insight as to what a floating foundation looks like. There will be 3 to 4 anchor points subsea, so they'll be up to realistically around 500 metres water depth. There'll be mooring lines. At the moment, they're mainly steel chains, but everyone's looking at synthetic sort of fibres as a new means, and that's certainly a technology advance and opportunity for New South Wales and Australia to develop. Going up to the transition piece, which is the yellow steel. Mainly it will be steel, depending on the type of foundation. It may be a mix of steel and concrete. You're looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 tonnes of steel within each transition piece, a tower of about 140 metres, and then you have blades. So at the moment, the largest ones are about 115 metres. So a tip height of up to 250 to 260 metres. So they are large structures. They will be with floating foundations. They are assembled quayside, and usually there'll be 3 tugs and a lead vessel which will take it out to site. Usually takes about a day and a half to get it out to site. The distances we're looking at, 20 kilometres from the coastline. So very heavy industry. Look, we think the port could be a real hotbed of activity when you're looking at a lot of these turbines being towed out to site. So it could be something very interesting for the region. In terms of the work we've done, we've been out actively the last 3 years working on the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm. Key things, we have done the wind resource assessment for those interested in wind speeds. The wind is not as strong as Gippsland. So Gippsland wind speeds, you're looking at an average of around about 9.4, 9.5 metres per second. Off the coast of Newcastle and Central Coast, it's more around 8.7 to 8.8 metres per second, which is still strong winds. You're looking at capacity factors of around 50%. So it is generating a lot of the time. Probably the key thing, which hopefully we'll be developing with everybody, is a lot of the stakeholder engagement work. We've been out actively, as I said, for just over 2 years. Sadly, being in Melbourne, I was locked up for most of 2020, but we were allowed out of prison late 2020. So we've been very much in the region a lot. We were last up there Tuesday of last week. And I think as a natural follow-on for those interested in finding out more, very happy for you to reach out to me so we can talk further about the project. One thing I thought I'd share here is just some really brief excerpts from a supply chain investment study which we released in March of this year. So it's a 254-page document. It's on our website. It took about 6 to 7 months. It runs through a lot of the opportunities, particularly for local supply chain. And when we talk of local, we talk very much around the Hunter in New South Wales. We do go further into the rest of Australia, but we're very focused in this report about it being around supporting the Hunter and Illawarra regions. So we go through, I think it's about 47 different categories. It's all very small there, but I encourage everyone to go to the website and download it. It gives a really good insight as to what the opportunities may be in Australia. The main purpose for this was really to get industry aware that there are opportunities, but also with the government at state and Commonwealth level to say, there is an opportunity. We just need to start spending some time putting money into it and targeting not only the job categories and industry required, but also workforce development so that we've got the right people either retraining or coming through. Offshore wind, we found in most of the regions we're in, is very enticing, particularly for those at school at the moment that are looking for large industries that can firstly keep them in the region where they live, but also give them global opportunities to travel as well. So offshore wind certainly provides that. And also for supply chain, it provides decades of opportunity, which really leverages off existing industries that are out there. A lot of steel production, a lot of steel fabrication, a lot of port-based work, welding. You know, there are so many different job categories out there. So that's a key opportunity for everybody. This is just the back ends of that report, just sort of showing that it's all well and good to say there are opportunities. You need a bit of a targeted plan around what the next phase is. So we've been working really actively, particularly at a Commonwealth and state government level. Look, we really enjoy our time more with industry and local regions when we're actually investigating what can be done. And I suppose really encouraging people to believe in themselves that, you know, the regions, you know, where we're looking at putting our projects are supported by a great workforce and more the community support as well. I'll get through there. I'm getting to the last few slides here, but I just want to give some background on what the journey's been like so far. I mean, people hear of offshore wind and think it's brand new. Look, but it's not. We've got a 10-year history here in Australia trying to get it up. Globally, the industry is really taking off. The real leaders are the UK and Europe. So Europe, UK's got really large targets. They want about 40 gigawatts of electricity by 2030 to come from offshore wind. So that's a huge amount of load out there, which is required to take things forward, particularly with the electrification of vehicles and other transport. There will be a need for increased electricity. It's not just a matter of replacing coal, which we're closing. It's about also providing new electricity sources. So we've got a 10-year sort of background at the moment. I think offshore wind is still very much in its infancy stage at the moment, but we've got legislation in place, large investors. We're very lucky with Oceanex to have Equinor joining us very soon. So it's very much heading the right way. And we're really clear that for us, the Hunter is our flagship project, along with the Illawarra. And I think the government's really clear on that. We're really hopeful that Minister Bowen will be making announcements around a Hunter region in offshore wind before the end of this year. So the next steps, look, it's a very busy time going forward, not just on Novocastrian, but just getting the whole industry up and going. As I keep saying to everyone, it's about building an industry more than just building a project. So there's a lot of cajoling, I hate the word lobbying, so I'll use the word influencing. That's going on across all levels, whether it be government, industry, working with traditional owners is a key part of what we're doing, and also local communities, but also remaining relevant globally as well. We're competing with other newer nations looking at offshore wind, such as Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam. They're really our competitors in the region for new investment. Taiwan, South Korea and Japan are already well served. Taiwan's only recently commissioned their first offshore wind farms in the last couple of years. So we're really at that next level where we're competing for supply chain, investment, and the workforce. Look, and that's the conclusion of my presentation. And obviously we'd love to take questions. Apologies for some of the issues I had here with the presentation, but it will be shared, as will my details there. I'm very comfortable if people want to call or follow up following today's session and after I'm in the booth.
Thanks, Andy. That was really informative. It's as you say, it's not a new technology, but it's probably very new to a lot of the delegation. And one of the things that came to mind for me is the stability of floating turbines offshore. How do you manage just environmental factors with this technology?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's what we're going through, Nicola. Thankfully, globally, you know, a lot of these lessons are being learnt at the moment. You would say with floating, given the relative sort of sleekness of the mooring lines and the anchors, there's less impact on the environment, but there are what they call inter-array cables between each foundation, which link back to the substation. Key thing we've got to do, we've been out doing studies, is we'll be extremely heavily regulated. We already are. So we've undertaken some initial environmental studies. We're aware of different species that are out there, of course, anywhere around Australia, particularly the East Coast with migrating southern whales and the like. We're aware of shipping lanes, defence, all of those things. So that's a key part of what we're doing, and that's why the development phase can take 5 to 6 years. I know in Star of the South, we've just had 2 seasons or 2 years worth of, look, there's turtle monitoring, dolphin monitoring, whales and other species monitoring as well. So it's drawn out. Look, hopefully a good developer picks an area where there's always going to be some activity, but where you can work in with, you know, the natural activity in aquaculture that's already out there. So that'll be a challenge. I think in Australia, we overstate a lot of stuff. You go to the North Sea where offshore wind, you know, is at its greatest. You've probably got 30 countries who, given any day, may not like each other. You've got unexploded bombs. You've got fibre optic cables everywhere, huge shipping routes as well. So we'll have issues here. I think our main thing is just to ensure that we use global examples and don't scare ourselves too much before we actually do anything.
Absolutely. And what an exciting decade ahead for Oceanex.
It will be. It's been a long journey. I've aged a fair bit. There's a few people on the call that knew me when I had mainly dark hair, but yeah, I don't know what I'll look like the next conference.
Well, let's just hope we're all getting older and wiser as we go in this process. If you'd like to engage with Andy, please head to the Oceanex Energy booth and talk all more about the Novocastrian Offshore Wind Farm project. It's absolutely fascinating. Thanks for joining us today, Andy.
Thanks, Nicola.